to my presentation. I'm Angel Rose PJ, studying in 10th standard in TGM Vidyaniketan. This presentation is based on the subject Information Technology. And the topic is Situation of various economic sectors in our economy before and after COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic brings many difficulties to various sectors in our economy. In this presentation, I am discussing about some of the sectors who are badly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic effect on the world. The economy has been dragged to recession and for a restart. The government is preparing to start the activities contributing to the economy again with all the precautions necessary. Due to this COVID-19 pandemic, the rate of unemployment is hitting the highest and the suffering occurs most to the daily wage workers because of the lockdown. In USA, millions of workers have registered for unemployment benefits. Even the figures show that in March end, the unemployment benefits complaint reached 36 million, which is a quarter of working population in the country. The advanced economies are expecting a growth of 6% this year. And even China, the country which the world is accusing the pandemic starts, has also a financial crisis. Due to the no use of transportation, the demand of oil has been stocked down in the markets, which led to the imbalance in the foreign direct investments of the countries supplying oil such as Arabic countries, etc. Here shows the situation of different sectors of our economy before and after COVID-19 pandemic. Situation of tourism sector before COVID-19 pandemic. Tourism sector got a major boost in the year of 2016-19 with the number of tourist arrivals crossing the 10 million mark. The minister said that the tourism sector is contributing 16.88% to India's GDP and had 18% share of jobs in those years. In those years, the tourism sector is moving fast in pace. Situation of tourism sector after COVID-19 pandemic. With the implementation of certain measures and campaigns like social distancing, community lockdown, work from home, for mandatory quarantine, pressure is created for halting the tourism sector. This led to a beginning of recession and depression for tourism sector. More than 100 countries have travel restrictions due to pandemic, which has affected the travel industry most. India's tourism industry anticipated to book an income loss of Rs 1.25 trillion in schedule 2020 as dropout of the shutdown of hotels and suspension in flight after the beginning and spread of coronavirus pandemic. During April-June, the India's tourism sector is relied upon to book an income loss of Rs 69.400 crore, meaning a year-on-year loss of 30%. The travel and tourism industry in India has been a noteworthy supporter of country's GDP. The division even creates an enormous employment base. In the same way, when by mid-March, the well-known vocation sports in India began to shut down and the news of putting an end on flying started to make adjust as a whole began to foresee the inauspicious fate of the travel industry in country as of now. This is a graph that shows the situation of tourism sector after COVID-19 pandemic. So the tourism backs to 1919 level as pandemic halts travel. impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the international tourism sector.
Paris no longer has its notoriously long queues at famous landmarks such as the Louvre. Businesses that depend on tourist spending say the impact of the pandemic is unprecedented.
It's massive for us. We're in an area where Americans like to come and also customers who are quite sensitive to the impact of this kind of event.
We're starting to feel the catastrophe. It's worse than the strikes, worse than the Yellow Vest protests.
The current situation in Venice for gondoliers is quite disastrous because there is no work.
Across Italy, travel is restricted, public gatherings banned. Normally one of Europe's top destinations, Rome's streets and Colosseum eerily quiet. All stores have been ordered closed, except pharmacies and groceries.
In the end, this health problem will be resolved, while the economic problems, perhaps, will take longer. I don't know how we're gonna get out of this.
The lack of tourists in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt is an ominous sign of how damaging the pandemic will be for the economy and the population of 100 million. 45 cases were confirmed on a Nile River cruise in Luxor, all connected to a single American tourist aboard the ship.
The streets of Luxor are empty because of the coronavirus. There are medical, health, and security checks because of fears the virus will spread from other countries to the Egyptian people.
Across Asia, the effects are apparent. From Phuket's quiet beaches to Jaipur in India, foreign tourists are staying away from the Pink City after a group of Italian tourists tested positive.
Our business is like a wall of glass, and a small stone can break whole wall.
And in Japan, where half of tourists come from South Korea and China.
We can only wait until it all calms down. We are all in the same boat.
From tour guides to street vendors, everyone who depends on visitor spending are feeling a pinch from the pandemic. Millions in one of the world's biggest industries suffering a devastating blow to their livelihoods. The UN's travel agency expects the pandemic to deal $1 trillion blow to the global economy. Andrew Chappell, Al Jazeera.
Here shows the situation of education sector before and after COVID-19 pandemic. Situation of education sector before COVID-19 pandemic. The education sector is functioning much well in 2018-19. The education industry contributed much to our India's GDP and it led to economic growth. Number of colleges and universities in India reached 41,015 and 1,103 representatives in 2018-19. In India, 14.65 students enrolled in higher education in the year of 2018-19. Situation of education sector after COVID-19 pandemic. Now the situation of education is completely changed from its original meaning, or we can say that the education is connected to earn money. Education sinks from professionalism. Everything was going well, but suddenly it stopped due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Most governments around the world have temporarily closed educational institutes in an attempt to control the spread of coronavirus pandemic. Students are locked in the walls of their house. Many exams cancelled, some of them postponed. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, many children in different countries lost schooling. To control the spread of coronavirus pandemic, more than 118 countries mandated temporary school closures, leaving nearly 1.6 billion children and youth out of the school. 5 months of the school closures could result in the loss of 0.6 years of schooling adjusted for quality. When the education institutions were closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it led to so many crises to our economy. Here is a video that shows the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the education sector.
To the challenge brought by COVID-19 pandemic that has also affected the sector of education, leading to envision the so-called new normal. In education, new normal requires to unlearn what we have always known. The rows of tasks, heavy bugs, tangible outputs, physical interactions, public exams, mass lectures, and even parent-teacher relationship. With this premise, distance learning is directly correlated as enabler of this new normal delivery mode of education, depending much on online learning and digital means to adapt as education practices transit to the new normal. Learning will shift from public space to personal space, as students study at the comfort and safety of their homes at their own pace. This changed the social interaction from physical to virtual. The new normal also means shift in the teaching delivery mode from one-size-fits-all to individualized and differentiated learning, where students can progress through the curriculum of different speeds and use different resources based on their own particular learning needs. This facet looks into the challenge of producing and redesigning learning programs and materials that cater the individual needs of students and their access to internet connectivity and digital resources. Another facet to consider is the shift of responsibility in learning facilitation that requires the active participation of household members, providing guidance and assistance throughout the home-based learning scheme. The new normal needs also to be defined in terms of new and alternative means of evaluating learning to monitor student individual achievement. Learning online has long been proven to be beneficial to students and community facing certain circumstances like what COVID-19 pandemic caused. No matter what the situation is, learning has to be consistently achieved by every student, for living means learning.
Situation of IT industry before and after COVID-19 pandemic. Situation of IT industry before COVID-19 pandemic. IT industry contributed much to our India's GDP and it led to economic growth. India had 55% share of $180 to 190 billion global information technology sourcing business in 2019. India's IT and ITES company have set up over 1,000 global delivery centers in 80 countries across the world. India have become the digital capabilities hub of the world with around 75% of global digital talent present in the country. India's IT and ITES industry grew to $181 billion in 2018-19. Exports from industry increased to $137 billion in 2019, while domestic revenue advanced to $44 billion. The IT industry contributed much to our economic growth in the year of 2018-19.
Situation of IT industry after COVID-19 pandemic. IT is also having a share of impact on top software companies like Tata Consultancy Services. Infosys and HCL impacted as technological spending reduced from US and Europe amid lockdown across the globe. HDFC Securities accept around 2 to 7% of reduction in the IT revenue because of the slow decision making. The next 6 months of business will be evaluating the loss of global economy due to COVID-19 pandemic. There will be pricing pressure and reduced revenue client bankruptcies due to the lower spending in the market as per the ICICI Direct.
As per global data reports, IT services will be hit hardest during COVID-19 and listed all the 17 tech media and telecom related sectors to have a negative impact during COVID-19 pandemic. Situation of oil industry before and after COVID-19 pandemic. The petroleum industry, which is also known as oil industry or oil patch, includes the global process like extraction, refining and market of petroleum products. The largest volume products of this industry is fuel, gasoline, etc. Oil is one of the most important commodities in the world. We can imagine a world without oil. Oil is a key energy source which is used in the vehicles. Then the petroleum is also used in plastics, paints, chemical, tape and so much more. The largest global producers of oil are US, Saudi Arabia, Russia, etc. These three countries produced approximately 33 million barrels of oil per day in the year of 2019. That is around 54% of total world production. Situation of oil industry before the COVID-19 pandemic. Oil demand increased by 1.5 million barrels in a day in the year of 2017 and it's growing at 1.6%, more than twice the average annual growth rate seen in a decade, International Energy Agency said in its report. On 31 March 2018, India had estimated crude oil reserves of 594.49 million tons and natural gas reserves of 1,339.57 million cubic meters. India was the second top net crude oil importers of 205.3 mt in the year of 2019. The production of crude petroleum in India had an increase of 0.63% between 2007 to 8 and 2018-19. India also produces petroleum products and produced 284.40 mt in 2018-19, a growth of 5.4% over the previous year. Among petroleum products, high-speed diesel accounted for 45.41, followed by the motor gasoline. Situation of oil industry after COVID-19 pandemic. As most of the countries are in lockdown state, the oil demand is decreasing day by day. Apart from the COVID-19 pandemic, there is a row going on between the OPEC groups of oil producers and Russia, which further masks the decrease in oil prices in the world. The Indian government draws an enormous piece of its income from the excise obligations, with generally 90% of originating from oil imports. It is intriguing to take note of that the price of retailers have not been marked down since the government sustained to find its cost. According to the Reserve Bank report of India, India's current account deficit remains at 0.2% of GDP as of December quarter in 2020, when contrasted to 2.7% of the same quarter in 2019. Since India imports over 80% its oil utilization, lowering oil prices and probably going to diminish the CAP considering the economy. The current investment concurring the funds in CAD at its very point be utilized to the financing of elevation in the COVID-19 pandemic.
Here is a video that shows the impact of COVID-19 on the oil industry.
The economic downturn resulting from the coronavirus is having important impacts on global energy markets, perhaps none as profound as what we're seeing take place in the oil market. Over the last several weeks, prices have declined by over 60%. This is happening for two primary reasons. The first is that global oil demand is down. Nobody's driving, people are flying less, factories that utilize oil are producing less. All of this has caused an historic drop in global oil demand in a very short period of time. The second is that an OPEC supply arrangement, which had been withholding excess oil from the market for the last several years, fell apart when its two major members, Russia and Saudi Arabia, could not come to an agreement about how much additional oil to cut in the face of the coming coronavirus and its economic impacts. This is having several effects around the world. The first is that countries that rely on oil income to balance their budgets are increasingly being harmed not only by the effects of the coronavirus, but also the loss of revenue coming from the lower prices from oil. The second is that the United States, which has become one of the largest producers of oil and natural gas in the world, is also being hit hard by the portions of its economy that rely on oil for economic growth and development. There are several things that are being done to deal with this crisis. The first is ongoing diplomatic efforts through the United States and Saudi Arabia and Russia, through organizations like OPEC and perhaps soon even the G20, to talk about how to put a supply arrangement back together, or at least to withhold the oil from the market that doesn't make sense to be on the market these days. The second is stimulative efforts in the United States to bolster the U.S. oil industry. Plans to purchase 77 million barrels of crude off the market to put into the nation's strategic petroleum reserve. There are other ideas coming from Congress and the administration about how to support both the workers in the oil industry and the industry itself. It's going to be a long road for the global oil markets and the global oil industry. Prices that have declined already are expected to stay low for the next several quarters, and economic recovery, while we don't know what that looks like because we don't know the trajectory of the coronavirus, is still a very uncertain set of circumstances.
This graph that shows the impact of COVID-19 on the oil industry. So the COVID-19 badly affected the oil industry, that we can clearly see through this graph. Situation of gold industry before and after COVID-19 pandemic. Situation of gold industry before COVID-19 pandemic. In the year of 2017 to 19, the gold industry contributed much to our India's GDP and it led to much economic growth. Demand for gold as a reserve asset centered considerably in 2018, rising by 74% compared to 2017 in response to the geopolitical and macroeconomic environment. In the year of 2017, investors added gold to their portfolios as income increased and the gold positive price momentum continued. In the year of 2017, it led to much economic growth, gold demand increased, market transparency, efficiency and others. Situation of gold industry after COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic had badly affected the India's economy. In the same way as other industries, the gold industry also faced so many difficulties due to this COVID-19 pandemic. Now the people are not spending any money on the luxury item. They are more concentrated towards putting their money on hygiene stuff and grocery products. As a prudent step, the administration has urged the citizens to delay betting capacities and enter out of the fundamental commodities during the lockdown. The Indian gems market blossomed with betting. The business further lost its gloss on Gaudi Padma, which fell during lockdown. And again, in an extraordinary chance to clock high deals was lost. Where the business are get exploding money related difficulties, the outcome of COVID virus on the gold industry is by all account overwhelming. Thus the business at the very point bringing about enormous misfortunes in the Indian market. Conclusion. We can imagine about the impact that caused by the COVID-19 pandemic to our world. The pandemic badly affected different sectors in our economy. So many workers lost their jobs and they became unemployed. Due to this COVID-19 pandemic, many families faces poverty. Alone US hotel industry projected to lose $3.5 million and around 6.5 million jobs out of 8.3 million total hotel jobs, and by looking at the COVID-19 growth at present. Thus, future predicted moving towards one of the worst recession of all time. COVID-19 is turning out to be worst nightmare for humans. We can hope that some miracle could happen to end this pandemic and make our world and economy stronger again. Here are some reference links that gives us the information about the sector that I discussed in this video and the situation of those sectors before and after COVID-19.
Thank you for watching my presentation.